Hi, welcome back to Stand on Guard with David Krayden. We got a great show for you, and yes, as promised, Trudeau's done it again this week, but there's other scandals to talk about. We'll be back with that very shortly. So we are in a very precarious position in this country. We need political change, but we also need to resolve to resist. Yeah, don't forget to hit those buttons because we really do need your support. I usually save this to the end, but my God, we're in trouble in this country. We've got censorship laws, 2 of them on the books. One is coming. It's going to outlaw hate speech. And you know what that means. Anything this liberal government doesn't like is hate speech. So we have to fight back. We have to resolve to resist, as I've said in the past, and I'm going to keep saying it every week. We have to resolve to resist this government because it is going after our free speech. It's going to make it very difficult to say what we want to say on the internet. And don't be fooled by these idiots who tell you that we have to make the internet safe. And that's what they're calling the bill, online safety, meaning safety for the government, safety for the Trudeau government. That's what it's really about. So I really encourage you. I encourage you to please support this show. And because I'm doing this independently, no media outlets backing this show. I'm putting this out independently because I believe in free speech very strongly. So we're going to move to the first story here, which is really quite something. And what would you say if your family was being targeted by communist China? Well, Conservative Member of Parliament Michael Chong faced that this week. He had to find out in the newspaper or online, however he read it. The Globe and Mail reported that based on a CSIS note it obtained, that Michael Chong's family, still residing in Hong Kong, had been under surveillance by the Communist Chinese government. Now, what do you think about that? That's a sitting MP, a former cabinet minister, the current Conservative official opposition critic for foreign affairs. His family's being targeted by communist China. And Trudeau, of course, does he know anything about it? Well, apparently not, even though there was a briefing note produced by CSIS. Now, they don't produce these things just for their own health. These are produced for the government, so the government can act upon them. Certainly, somebody in the Trudeau government must have seen this briefing note, even if it was just before an election, because the government continues throughout the election. The government doesn't disappear or evaporate. There's still a legitimate, valid government during any election. Somebody must have seen this briefing note, but they did not act upon it. When did they act upon it? Well, when the Globe and Mail published the story and it became an issue in question period. So here we go. Here's how Trudeau reacts to this, and this is infuriating.
His government produced a briefing note which exposed these threats to the MP's family 2 years ago. And yet the diplomat that worked to punish a Canadian MP's family is still in Canada when the Prime Minister could have expelled him. Why didn't he expel this diplomat?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
It is absolutely unacceptable for any Canadian to be subject to intimidation via foreign power, particularly threats against family and against families of members of Parliament. That's why, as the reports came out this morning, I immediately asked officials to follow up on these reports and to get to the bottom of this. I also asked for outreach both on the political and the official side to the member in question. We are going to continue to make sure this is taken extremely seriously.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, that's just false. He didn't immediately take action. He took action after the media found out about it.
That's right.
His government has known that a Canadian MP had his family threatened because that MP voted for human rights in the House of Commons. He knew about that for 2 years. He did exactly nothing. Furthermore, the same diplomat that orchestrated these threats against the MP's family still works in the Toronto consulate at Beijing, even though the Prime Minister has the power to expel him. Will he expel him today?
Yeah. Right Honourable
Yeah. Now, what does immediately mean for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? It means when he sees the story on his desk in the news clippings, that's what immediately means. It doesn't mean when he sees the briefing note. And I'm sure he saw the briefing note. He hasn't denied seeing the briefing note, has he? No. But this again is an example of how the Liberal government acquiesces, surrenders to communist China. Now, communist China thinks it can get away with this. It's the most arrogant superpower since the Soviet Union. But it is extremely arrogant. It's the most arrogant power on earth, the most arrogant state on earth. It thinks it can do whatever it wants to with impunity. And it thinks it can do this to Canadians, even a Canadian sitting MP, a former cabinet minister, because it knows Justin Trudeau is weak. He's pusillanimous. He is ineffective. And he has been coddling the Chinese government for years. He's the one who started his political career, essentially, before he became prime minister, by saying that communist China was the basic dictatorship he most admired because it could turn its economy around on a dime. This is what Justin Trudeau believes in. He has been true and faithful to those remarks as prime minister. He's coddled the Chinese. You recall at the G20 summit in Bali last fall, Justin Trudeau was asked by reporters whether or not he would consider the extermination of the Uyghur population in China as a genocide. Justin Trudeau refused to call it that. He refused to call it that. Why? Because he's a weakling. Why? Because he doesn't want to offend China. At the same conference, he was taken aside, although the cameras were running, by Chinese dictator Xi Jinping, and he was given a dressing down because Trudeau had publicly talked about their discussions. Trudeau looked extremely embarrassed and downtrodden. So much so, he had to run to the men's room after that. I don't know if he relieved himself or threw up, but it was enough to make all Canadians throw up. But the China scandal continues. And of course, we are also continuing to deal with the issue of China's interference in Canadian elections. And there are two committees looking at this now. But here's Michael Cooper, member of Parliament for Edmonton St. Albert, Conservative, who's taking a former CEO of the Trudeau Foundation, Morris Rosenberg, to task. And this is really worth watching.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Rosenberg. Mr. Rosenberg, you claim that the source of the donation was the Millennium Golden Eagle International Canada, Inc., yet on July 14, 2016, when you sent international bank transfer instructions, nowhere mentioned in that letter is Millennium Golden Eagle International Canada, Inc. The only names on that letter were Ben and New. Why?
I don't have the document and I can't answer the question because I don't recall right now.
Highly suspicious. You signed it, highly suspicious that on a document sent to transfer the money, that nowhere is that entity mentioned, just the names of those donors. You claim that the receipt was sent to the registered office of this company, but yet in the September 26, 2016 correspondence with the Trudeau Foundation, the address that the receipt was requested to be sent is the same address as the China Cultural Industry Association. Can you explain that?
Well, I'll say two things. First of all, I know that Mr. Zhang was the president of Millennium International and director of Millennium Canada. I'm not sure what other positions were. Also the president of the China.
Yeah. And you know what the China Cultural Industry Association is? It's a company that is associated with the United Front Work Department.
Yeah, so anything in China ultimately leads back to the Chinese Communist government because they control everything. It's a totalitarian state. Even people who are running businesses ultimately are answerable to the Communist Chinese government. I think Michael did an excellent job here of showing how the Trudeau Foundation obviously really doesn't know what's going on half the time. And this is outrageous. So I want to move to the next story here, which was Trudeau was recently in New York City. And exactly what he was there for, except to do a lot of selfies with some so-called celebrities, it's not exactly clear, except he was there to deliver one of the most incredibly awful speeches to the Council on Foreign Relations. Now, when I say CFR or Council on Foreign Relations, a lot of people's ears are going to go up because, of course, that has been the subject of conspiracy theories for decades. Some people think that's who really controls American foreign policy. These are the decision makers behind the scenes who make those decisions about American policy in general. But Trudeau was there to lecture them, as he always does. Trudeau has never failed to disappoint in that regard. He just loves to lecture and preach about how wonderful he is and how wonderful Canada has become under his leadership. He gives no credit to anybody else. In fact, in one point in the speech, he talks about how Canada, after 2015, when he was elected, was signing free trade deals with everybody. Actually, Mr. Trudeau, that occurred under the former government of Prime Minister Stephen Harper, a conservative, who was actually, yes, signing free trade deals with a lot of countries. So don't take credit for things you didn't even do. Take credit for the things you have done, which has been an absolute disaster. Well, we got a clip here of that speech, and it really is incredible because bear in mind, he's lecturing the Americans and the world in this speech about how we have to resist authoritarianism and embrace democracy. We have to restore faith in democracy and democratic ideals. This is the same guy, the very same day he's making this speech, the House is passing his internet censorship bill. So we can't say what we want to say on the internet, and it's going to put a lot of independent media out of business if this thing continues. But just listen to this.
Canada has worked to demonstrate that when we strengthen the middle class, we strengthen social cohesion, we reinforce faith in our democratic institutions at home, and engage with the world in consequential and positively impactful ways. And major global investors are looking around the world to where they can be part of that. Canada will always be a reliable partner because the key is simple. Make sure you're putting people first. As your president says, grow the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. Put people's dignity, their rights, their environment, and their future at the center of what we do as policymakers, as business people, as commentators, as champions of democracy and rules-based trade. That's how we deliver on the promise of progress.
What an abysmal hypocrite. These people had to put up with a nauseating 18 minutes of this. But of course, we're so used to it in Canada. He's always lecturing us about how wonderful he is, how wonderful his government is, and what great things it's doing for Canadians. He's not putting people first. He's putting Justin Trudeau first. He always has. That's why he's a narcissistic person, and he always has been. And it's all about Justin Trudeau. Always will be. It's mind-boggling that he continues to exist in his own little universe, his own little microcosm, the Trudeau microcosm, where nobody else matters except Justin Trudeau. And I predict he's not going to last much longer because the walls are closing in on Justin Trudeau. I want to show you something, though, but it really is something else. It really is something else because the PSAC strike is over. Well, there's still some folks at the the tax department have not signed an agreement, but virtually everybody else has. And they will be, I'm sure, because they basically got everything what they wanted. You know, they were asking for the universe, and they got a little less than that. They're going to be able to work from home because it's going to be decided on a case-by-case basis. And just which manager in the public service is going to say, no, you can't work from home? Because the first time they say that, there's going to be a human rights tribunal investigating it. So you can bet they're going to be able to work from home. And this problem is just starting. I don't mind working from home, but I draw the line when it's public service employees who don't do that much work at work. And it's impossible to fire them. So it's fine to say, okay, if people don't produce at home, then they should be fired. But try to fire a public service employee, even if they're not doing their job. So I think they're going to be inclined to do less work from home than they are at the job, if that's possible. But, you know, it is incredible to me how they get away with this, and they continue to get away with this. But here's how they face the strike. This says it all. Yeah, having a great time. That's kind of indicative of what they do on the job every day. I'm being a little too sarcastic about this. I know they're a good public employee. Yes, there are. But there's also a lot of them freeloading. And I call this the freeloading convoy because here they are on the street, but blocking Wellington Street, the same street that the Freedom Convoy demonstrators were on. And they're singing and dancing on the street, just like the Freedom Convoy, except this was the union that condemned the Freedom Convoy protest because they're all a bunch of racists and misogynists, blah, 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 blah. The same nonsense that they were repeating from the Prime Minister's talking points. That was unacceptable to have a peaceful protest on Wellington Street. But it's okay for these guys to block Wellington Street, have their little party, block ports, cut off the power and the water to a Canadian Forces base, at least one in Petawawa, and basically to engage in civil disobedience during strike action. Now, this is completely unacceptable. Of course, they get away with it because Justin Trudeau is on their side, and they're on Justin Trudeau's side. And this is all a big charade, as usual. And I tell you, I don't think this is going to end anytime soon. Now, I want to get to our last subject here because I'm very excited. We're going to be talking to Tamara Lich, the author of Hold the Line. It's an autobiography, but it talks a lot about her involvement in the Freedom Convoy, which we just mentioned, back in February 2022. I was there almost every day, freezing, but very much in solidarity with these people who were demanding free speech and the right to refuse vaccinations and mandatory vaccinations. And this was a very principled and peaceful protest. It was really a political awakening for a lot of folks. And I think it's very important that we talk to Tamara about this because she's a heck of a woman. She's a fighter. She was held in jail without bail for a long period of time. And the government wanted to make her and did make her a political prisoner. And I just want to show you this clip here.
Tamara Lich has been released from jail.
Western separatist Tamara Lich.
Lich will remain in custody.
We have breaking news out of Ottawa to tell you about. A judge has made a decision on whether to grant bail for Tamara Lich, one of the leaders of that recent demonstration in Ottawa.
You may have seen me on the news, but there's more to my story. In my new book, Hold the Line, I share the story of the Freedom Convoy from the heart of the Freedom Convoy. It's a story of hope, courage, and coming together as a community in the Canadian way. You can buy my new book at theconvoybook.com, and in that book, you're going to hear stories from the heart of the convoy, as well as my arrest and my time in jail, like you've never heard them before. Until very recently, I've been quite silent because of my bail conditions, but now I'm ready to tell my story, my side of the story. I know the mainstream media isn't going to be fair to me, as they've already called me and my friends from the convoy terrorists.
There is increasing concern about violent online rhetoric supporting the convoy, and that those with extreme views are planning on attending.
The mayor, who made, in my estimation, just a horrendous decision to negotiate with terrorists.
So I'm launching a book tour across Canada. We'll be doing interviews, signing books, and saying thank you to all Canadians.
Yes, David Krayden here for the Post Millennial, and today we're interviewing Freedom Convoy leader Tamara Lich, and she is with us today to discuss not only her and tremendous experiences as a leader of that convoy, but the release of her recent book, Hold the Line, which is climbing up the bestseller list on Amazon. So how have things been before we get to the book, Tamara? How have things been?
They've been good, very busy, really busy, but very good. Like I said, we're starting to get into some summer here, so I'm just trying to get outside a little bit more. And I spent a lot of time still, it seems, in front of my computer. So, but it's been good, yeah.
So why did you write Hold the Line? What inspired you to write it?
Well, I think it's just such a beautiful story. It's such a beautiful story of community and, a nation coming together, and also a lot of people. I get messages from people all the time. People, they want to know how I'm doing, how I'm holding up, and so this was a way for me to let people know that, hey, I'm doing okay.
Well, you certainly seem to be. So this book is climbing up, or is it number one on the Amazon bestseller list?
It is, as far as I know, still. Yes, unbelievable.
That is fun. So does that surprise you that many people are interested in your story?
It does. Actually, we did a soft launch on a Thursday afternoon, and it was a number one bestseller the next day in Canadian biographies, I think, in one column anyways. And I mean, I know that there's people out there that are really interested in the story, but I had no idea that it would do that well.
Well, I'm personally not surprised, but you're doing a book tour. Is this going across Canada? Where are you right now?
Yes, we're going to launch that. We're in the process of finding me an assistant who can help me organize my life. And once we have that in place in the next day or so, we'll be confirming dates for the book tour. And yes, the plan is definitely to go all across the country if we can.
Are you going to be announcing these on your website or anybody else's website?
They'll definitely be on the convoybook.com website, which is where the book is at right now too, the link for that. And actually, I'm working on a website of my own right now also. So we'll definitely have those dates made public as soon as we have them all confirmed.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So I believe you're also doing some media work on your own. You've got a studio now, and are you doing interviews with people or?
Yes, Rebel was kind enough to send me a nice fancy new microphone and a good webcam so that I can do media. I have been doing media for the book, yes, over the last week and a half also.
Well, I'm so glad to hear my old friend Ezra, who I've known for decades now, has been helping him out this way, and it's fantastic because it's a new media, like all of us who are supporting you in this and who supported the Freedom Convoy, and we're out there sometimes getting ourselves kicked and but covering this news. So everybody, I think we're all united behind you here, Tamara, and it's fantastic that this book is doing so well.
Thank you.
I'm sure while you're writing the book, you reflected on, what the Freedom Convoy was, what it meant for people, not only yourself, but for many Canadians, including, myself. I was certainly affected by it, covering it and I was covering it for 2 media organizations at the time. But the effect of it was just, I think, phenomenal for a lot of people. But what kept you focused and motivated when you were sitting in jail with no bail? I mean, what did you focus on?
I did a lot of praying and I did a lot of meditation, and I just felt like I understood that there was more work to be done, and perhaps, the universe or God or whatever you choose to call it just wasn't finished with me yet. And so I repeated, "Thy will, not my will," many times, many, many times. And really feel, and I've said this many times before, that for me, this was a very divine experience. And I think that continues today. I mean, I feel like we were all guided and protected. Chris Barber led that convoy all the way across Canada in January without a single accident, not a single accident or injury, which is in itself a miracle. And how we stayed there, and everything stayed peaceful. We had crowds there in the tens of thousands sometimes, you know? So yeah, it was just such a beautiful, beautiful experience for me. And even jail can't take that away from me.
You certainly were a political prisoner. Did you feel like a political prisoner while you were in jail?
Well, I've never been in that position before, so I don't really know what that would feel like. I certainly do. I certainly do get the impression that there's a bit of a vendetta and maybe some personal hard feelings, in this, because the prosecution has just been unbelievably malicious and unprecedented.
Yeah.
You know,
I guess what I meant was, I mean, you were treated worse than most murderers and rapists are in this country, who are sometimes routinely released on bail. And there seemed to be a political motivation to keep you in jail without any, at one point, any hope of bail. And they were certainly trying to make an example out of you. I mean, the judicial system, the government, the police, all of the establishment forces seem to be making an example out of you. And I'm certainly, at some point, you must have felt that the weight of the power on your shoulders.
well, honestly, I kind of wear that as a badge of honor, because I'm only 5 feet tall, 1 inch. I'm about 125 pounds.
Mhm.
And for them to treat me that way, they must be awfully frightened.
Hmm.
Something about me has scared them to the point where they're willing to take these desperate measures and unprecedented steps. So I'm a pretty tough girl, I think. And yeah, I just, again, I kind of wear it as a badge of honor. Obviously, they feel very threatened by me.
I think they certainly did. What was your reaction to the Emergencies Act inquiry report? And I think we last met in the midst of that, when the inquiry was meeting in Ottawa. What was your reaction to the report that basically vindicated Justin Trudeau and his decision to invoke the Emergencies Act?
Well, it was disappointing. I think we all knew or expected that that was going to be the outcome, but there was still a little bit of a sliver of hope that he would rule in a different way. So it was a gut punch to us for sure, and extremely disappointing. Basically, the fine print is that government incompetence is now the benchmark for invoking the Emergencies Act. The criteria that needed to be met legislatively were never met. So yeah, it was definitely the wrong call, in my opinion.
Yes, and it was, certainly a lot of us felt that way. So the gag order obviously has been lifted from you. You're free to speak, or you wouldn't be here right now, or writing a book. Are there any other legal ramifications yet to come?
Oh yes. Well, Chris and I still have our trial in September. We have a 2-week trial starting on September the 5th, and then we still have the civil suit a $406 million civil suit against us. That includes myself and Chris and some of the road captains and other supporters, and he's trying to include the donors now too, so that we have a major class action lawsuit against us. We're still waiting for it. Hasn't been certified yet, but we anticipate he'll be trying to do that very soon. So I anticipate, unfortunately, being tied up in the legal system for years. Once you get caught up in this system, it's really hard to get out of it.
That's true. The trial in September, though, should probably attract a lot of support for you and Chris. And are you anticipating a lot of crowds?
I think so. I mean, we've certainly had a lot of support anytime that we've had to show up in Ottawa. So I don't expect this will be any different. And the Canadian people and have just been amazingly supportive, and praying for us and sending lots of love. So yeah, it'll be good to be back. I have a soft spot for Ottawa. People might find that funny, but there's really great people there.
Well, I always seem to find myself coming back here for one reason or another, because I always want to go back to the West Coast and to BC, but here I am back in Ottawa. So I know what you mean. And there are good people here, despite what you might read or see. Did you see any irony? I don't know if you saw the pictures of the Public Service Alliance of Canada employees dancing and singing in the street on Wellington Street, no less, in the midst of their strike, where they basically got everything they wanted. Yet this was the same union that criticized the Freedom Convoy as being a bunch of misogynists, racists, and a danger to society. Did you find that a bit ironic?
Oh, I found many ironies and double standards in that whole situation. I was watching it with great interest. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why they had to wrap that up so quickly, because the comparisons were getting more and more vocal in the media.
Yeah.
So I think they needed to shut that down as fast as they could, because they were starting to look really bad.
Yeah, it almost looked like a parody at times. It was just, I just found it absolutely astounding that they didn't see how hypocritical they looked. But then again, that's like our government here. So
Yes, I was just gonna say, it's like how we've all lived since 2015.
Well, I was watching the testimony yesterday of Justin Trudeau's brother, Alexandre Trudeau, in front of the Ethics Committee, and I was just astounded that there's actually another Trudeau who's more annoying and more arrogant than Justin Trudeau. So it was
wow,
just incredible how he was calling out a media organization that criticized him, saying you can't take those people seriously. That's just not credible journalism because they don't meet his standard. And I thought, that's Justin Trudeau all over again, because it's
totally, because they don't print what they want them to print. I mean, thank goodness for independent media throughout this whole thing, and citizen journalists. If it wouldn't have been for you guys and Rupa and Andrew Lawton and Rebel News, of course, and so many other people that got out there and on the ground and actually showed what was really happening. So yeah, for him to even say that is still astonishing. They're still trying to make us believe that stuff.
Yeah. I mean, CBC and CTV rarely left their cloistered offices during the convoy demonstration. It was just too cold for them. And those of us who were out there, I mean, we were looking at potential frostbite. It was so cold. But CBC just stayed in their offices and had their talking heads, and they all agreed that this was a bad thing. And it just amazed me.
As it came out in the POEC, David, they didn't have to leave their office because they were already being fed the narrative. I mean, they had the whole narrative crafted, like we saw at the inquiry, before I even got in Big Red to leave. So, I mean, they didn't have to leave their offices. They were getting it spoon-fed to them the whole time.
Very, very true. And that's, that continues, and that's what happens with a media that's subsidized by the federal government, and of course one branch of the media that's completely owned by the federal government, and it certainly does have a very toxic effect. And we saw that so vividly during the Freedom Convoy, where every mainstream media outlet was using the same script, the same talking points, and talking to the same people and they all agreed. And that to me is indicative of a one-party state and an authoritarian regime. And as you say, thank God there are independent media, and Trudeau is doing his best, of course, to destroy that independent media. But I don't think he's going to be successful, because there's a thirst amongst so many Canadians for the truth, for alternate news, for objectivity, for something other than CBC/CTV/ the mainstream media. So I'm hopeful. But what do you think, Tamara, is the legacy of the Freedom Convoy? What does it mean for Canadians?
Unity and hope, and it just showed fundamentally who Canadians are. The donations, whether it was monetary or food or clothing. I mean, I at least feel so blessed to have witnessed and been a part of, was the greatest show of pride in our country that I've seen in my lifetime. And it's unfortunate that the government chose to stomp all over it, because they could have turned that into a beautiful, beautiful moment.
I think those are beautiful words. And I think a lot of us who watched that event unfold throughout that month of February and a few days in January were amazed that there was a political unification in this country around what really matters. And I think for me, that was the defining moment, is that it was no longer about party labels so much, or even liberal conservative. It was about Canadians fighting for free speech and fighting for the basic freedoms that this government really wants to take away from us. And would you say that was relevant as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And again, to draw parallels to the strike that was just happening with the PSAC workers, I mean, we all just wanted to go back to work and get our lives back and our freedoms back. And these guys are out there stomping their feet and crying because they want to get paid more money and they don't want to have to go into an office.
Yeah.
Are you for real? They already make 8% more than people doing similar work in the private sector. Like, crazy.
Yeah. It was one of those great ironic moments in Canadian history, and to me, it was a charade that they knew they were going to get what they wanted from the Trudeau government all along. Those are his core supporters, and to me, they really mishandled the moment, but that's for history to decide. Thanks so much for joining me today, Tamara. And I really wish you the best on the book. And if let's stay in touch. And if you do a book launch here in Ottawa as part of your tour, I will be there. And
I should do one right at Parliament Hill. What do you think?
You should. Yes, you should. You should do one at Parliament Hill, because I can tell you that there's an audience here, not only for your book, but to see you again, and to come out and see you and to hear how you're doing. And people want to read your book to find out what all of this meant to you and what you really meant to the convoy. I think you were instrumental, you were key, you were integral to the success of the convoy. And it didn't end with the invocation of the Emergencies Act. It never really ended. You proved the point. You were able to get COVID-19 mandates stalled and eventually reversed. You had success despite being stomped on, as you say, by Trudeau's police, judicial system, and everything else that lined up behind this prime minister. So I think you can take pride in the fact you had a political success here, a social success, and I hope your book has the same kind of success.
Thank you. Thanks so much, David.
Thanks for joining me again. For the Post Millennial, I'm David Krayden. Joining me today was Freedom Convoy leader Tamara Lich. Sam, you believe how the left-wing media treated her, how the Trudeau government treated her, how the judicial system treated her? For goodness sakes, this is a woman who decided to make take a stand, to make a political statement, a peaceful political statement, and she was treated like some kind of criminal. She was treated as bad as a murderer or a rapist. That's how we treat those people better in this country. So let's face it, this is going to be a fantastic interview. I'm looking forward to talking to her tomorrow, and we're going to be putting the broadcast up right away. But I last spoke to Tamara at the Emergencies Act inquiry here in Ottawa, had a picture taken with her, and just, said she had been reading my columns about her, about the Freedom Convoy, said she really enjoyed them. And I said, I really want to tell you that I admire the heroic stand that you've taken. So that's coming up tomorrow. Once again, I want to remind you, I want to ask you, please support this independent broadcast, because we're doing what the mainstream media is not doing. Look at this as your opportunity to have your say. And I read your comments every week. I know what you want. I know what you're saying. And I'm trying to deliver the news as you want it. Truthfully, objectively. If I will criticize any political party if I think it's out of line. I'm in nobody's political pocket. I never will be. I never have been. Ask anybody who's ever worked with me. No matter what job I've had, I've never been in anyone's political pocket. Because I fight for truth. I fight for objectivity. And most of all, I fight for free speech, which is fast becoming evanescent, vanishing in this country, thanks to Justin Trudeau. He wants you to watch YouTube that he approves of. And that's going to be a god-awful YouTube channel hosted by Justin Trudeau, where he hectors, lectures, and tells you how to live and what to do, and more importantly, what to think. That's what he's all about. So until the next time we meet, God bless you. And remember, resolve to resist. I hope you're enjoying this channel as much as I enjoy putting the material on here. This is not just about politics. I sing some of my favorite songs from the Great American Songbook. And you can also watch my latest show where we do some of the news you're not going to hear anywhere else. But please like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications. If you want to be part of this station, please be a subscriber. We want you.